Maurice Nicole's Psychological Commentaries, Volume 3, based on Nicole's work with Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, and Jung. Quiremid Ugly, October 6, 1945, Commentary on the Application of the Work, Ideas to Oneself, Video 1 of 2. It has often been said that this work is to make us think. Mr. Ouspensky used to emphasize that people do not think. They read newspapers instead, or they ask their friends what they ought to think, or they follow in general consensus of opinion. This lack of individual thinking leads to mass thinking. Mass thinking is directed by someone who tells people how to think by broadcasting, by propaganda. On one occasion, when I was talking to Mr. Ouspensky about this, he said that in the past century, people used to think for themselves far more than they do nowadays. People, he said, used to think more individually. Today, it could be said that people have given up thinking and simply wish to be told what to think. The work, he added, is to make us think for ourselves. On another occasion, he said that the only way for a man to be awakened nowadays is through his thinking part. Look at the increasing sleep of humanity, he added. It is extraordinary that people give up one thing that is left to them, namely the power of thinking for themselves. All these books, papers, and radios and so on prevent people from thinking, but they are supposed to increase thought. Now, to think is quite different from to remember, and it is quite different from having fixed opinions. If people take the work as a cut and dried subject and they simply store in their memory, then they do not think about the ideas of the work for themselves. When people cease to think for themselves, they surrender the one part of them that can still lead to awakening. We tend to wish everything to be duly explained for us without the effort of finding our own solution, that is, without the effort of thinking for ourselves. If a person puts to himself these questions, who am I? What am I? He or she will tend to either to find out from someone some answer to these questions or regard them as morbid. The work says a great deal about who am I and what am I. But what it says is in general terms so as to give a guide to the individual thinking. The work, for example, says that we're all asleep in life and that we live in a world of sleeping people in which everything goes the only way it can go. If I ask the work, what am I? The answer is that I am a man asleep. Now, it is quite possible simply to accept the idea that we are all asleep and that we live in a world of sleeping humanity without ever thinking about it individually. In that case, the work becomes similar to propaganda, and people will say, oh, yes, we're all asleep and we live in a sleeping world of people. And perhaps they will add, well, that is what the work teaches us. This is memory without thought. This is not applying the work to oneself through thought. In fact, you can accept the ideas of the work simply because you do not wish to think. All this means that the work is merely in your memory as something learned by heart and not as something and not yet engaged with your individual thinking and so combining with yourself. It has not yet caught fire. Through self-observation, you may see that you are asleep and begin to think about your own state of sleep for yourself. This is intelligent effort. This is applying the work to yourself intelligently. You may begin to think, is it true that humanity is sleeping and that everything happens with the only way it can happen as long as people are asleep? If you meditate and observe, you will then begin to catch sight of the truth of one of the great ideas of the work. You will do this for yourself. The ideas of sleep will then be no longer a matter of memory, but of actual experience that you've begun to undergo and which will change you. Learning things by heart is not the work, save in a limited sense. When you learn a thing by heart, it lies in merely the formatory memory. Why it is called learning by heart, I do not know, because the heart is emotional. Now it is said in the work that the idea that it teaches must become emotional. It is necessary to feel them. It is necessary actually to feel, for example, that you yourself are asleep and that you are yourself are going without any real inner direction. Just to be told that you're asleep and that humanity is asleep and to repeat it like a parrot is to miss what the work is about. And so it is a sin against the work. It means that you've never observed yourself in light of the work, but the work is light. And it is you yourself who have to realize that you're asleep in the light and truth of the work, and that you live in a world of sleeping humanity in which everything happens. Then these ideas will no longer be mere chatter or a mere matter of memory, a mere matter of looking up in your notes, but will become a living experience. When this starts, the work is no longer formatory memory, like trying to remember a scientific book or an article that you have read, but a process taking place in you, changing your whole way of thinking. I want to emphasize further that this matter of and the work lying in your memory and the work lying in your individual understanding. You may easily remember the idea that you are asleep, and you may accept this idea without any individual thought of what it means. I mean, you may take it as true, but nothing is true for you unless you have seen its truth for yourself. You may remember all the ideas of this work and accept them in that way and simply call upon your memory to answer questions. The work then lies only in your outer superficial memory and is not yet combined with you through emotional perception of its truth. You may indeed possess beautiful notes in black and red ink of everything that has been said in the work and think that you know about the work, but you will know nothing about the work. It has made no contact with you yourself, and the subject of the work is you yourself. And the ideas of this work are actually to change this thing called you yourself. You may, for example, have the most exact notes about everything that has been said about negative emotion, about levels of being, and what you have to do in order to make your being grow. And yet it may simply lie in your memory without your having done a single thing to apply the work to your own being through self observation.